All right. Well, good day, everyone, and welcome to one of PrimePay's monthly broker series webinars here in April 2016. I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules here today to sit with us. My name is Steve Jackson. I'm the Senior Vice President of Strategic Development and Channel Sales here at PrimePay, and I've had the actually most fortunate opportunity to be able to provide these webinars month after month, and to do so here over the last several years. And as many of you know, many of you have joined us over those years, and you know that we try to take a lot of the technical guidance and communication that's coming out from ACA to, oh my word, all sorts of different topics, and be able to deliver them to you in a very practical way so that you can walk away from this webinar today, as you hopefully have with many of the others, and be able to communicate that guidance, that strategy, that opportunity easily and more effectively to your clients and to your prospects. So why don't we just do a little bit of logistics here for the day so that everybody kind of knows what's going on. As you may have noticed, everyone's phone lines are muted. We have an enormous amount of folks on today, which we are thrilled to have. I thought in one respect, I figured, weren't you guys tired of talking about ACA? Apparently not. All right, so no, we've got a lot to cover here today. So your lines are muted. However, as we have done with previous webinars, we want to hear from you. So as I go through the material today, you might have a specific question that you want to address. If you would, go into the GoToMeeting menu bar, go ahead to the question box, type in your question. There is a possibility that I may be able to answer your question, as I go along, but a lot of times I am unable to. However, we will get back to you. So we'll take your question offline and we'll be able to get back to you with, we hope, the answer. Okay, so we will get back to you. So please go ahead and type in your question as I go along, because there are some specific technical pieces here today that certainly, I'm sure, some questions will abound. We are also recording this webinar today. So for all of you, you will be able to view this recording. We post all of our webinars on our Broker Concierge YouTube channel. And so public channel, you may go there and view that at your leisure. But we do also have some additional benefits for our broker concierge partners, so there will be additional content, and also the slide deck will be made available to our broker concierge partners. One additional item that we have, and I'll mention it here again at the end of our webinar today, but we are providing everyone who attends a free CE voucher for you to be able to get additional continuing education credits at little to no cost. Okay, so you have an opportunity there, and maybe that's why we have so many that joined today. I don't know. I thought it was maybe for the topic, but maybe it was for the vouchers. So we are thrilled to have you. Let's go ahead and jump right in. So as you see here with our title today, ACA Compliant Spring Cleaning, and I have here just a quote from Sheryl Sandberg, COO of Facebook, that I thought was really apropos here to our topic of consideration here today. And she said this: "We cannot change what we are not aware of, and once we are aware, we cannot help but change." So think about ACA here a second, and just what we just went through, what you went through, PrimePay as an entity, but also our clients who had that reporting obligation and that requirement squarely on their shoulders. Many of these questions that you and I and our teams went through was the whole, we don't know what we don't know. Many employers didn't know that full requirement. Certainly they had an ability to see a lot of the requirement, but maybe not all of the pieces and facets of what it all meant. And so as we look back, as we think about spring cleaning, I also try to think, spring cleaning, right? Now I think as we are showing this webcast, I think those in the Northeast and even upper Midwest are probably saying, Steve, there is no spring yet. It's still very cold here right now. But no, it is indeed spring. And when we think about spring cleaning, we think about all those things as we look back, as we've accumulated things, right? As we think about our house and all that stuff that we have, we think about, okay, now's the time to kind of get back engaged, look at what we have, review it, see if we need it, throw it out, give it to charity, all of those things that come with spring cleaning, it's very vivid in our minds. We now want to do that same piece here with ACA. We now have gone through at least the extended distribution deadlines here as of the end of March. And you and I and PrimePay here, we've experienced a lot. And I think that there is much to learn, right? So as Cheryl states there above, once we are aware, we cannot help but change. There is a great opportunity for us to take the previous weeks and months of frustrations, challenges, issues, situations that occurred, all in fulfilling this reporting obligation. Now is the time to really think about those specific challenges and be able to ensure that our clients do not make those same mistakes or are more prepared. And so what I've done here, at least as this ACA spring cleanup activities, is that today we're going to focus on 3 areas. And I know before you guys all say, sure, Steve, there's just 3? Yeah, right. I mean, you pack a ton of things. Shouldn't there be like 20 things? Well, it might feel like that when I'm done. But, in this next hour, we are going to really focus and hone in on some of the biggest areas and causes of confusion, I don't know, shall we say frustration and irritation, but also just there was a lot of confusion, certainly, as we all were digging into this for the very first time. And I want to touch on these 3 areas. So controlled groups, measurement periods, data management. These were all critical areas that I think we can now come to you today and say, how can we better prepare ourselves for this, but also prepare our clients and also prospective clients, of this as well. I think we can truly make an impact. Okay, so before we jump into that first item, I told you I had a few other things. There was a great question that came through our desk. We have seen certainly series of this before, but I thought, it would be very good just to kind of review this here with you all. And so I'm just labeling this kind of the question of the month here that we've seen. And it talks about affordability and determining affordability. So the ACA, a definition that if an applicable large employer needs to make it affordable for employees, right, for the offer of coverage. So in determining affordability, can it be done on an individual basis, since we have several discrepancies, kind of several different kind of tiers and kind of employee bases that would maybe make it unaffordable for some and affordable for others? And that's the basis of the question. So one of the first kind of did you knows here that I just do want to stress, and just as the number that is out there today based on cost of living adjustments, is the 2016 affordability percentage, which is now up to 9.66%, okay? So 9.66%, that is what we are using. So as you think about this question, oftentimes you get down into the discrimination or the discriminatory practices of a situation, such as this, So basically what this employer is asking is, can we literally kind of change what we are contributing strictly, on a per employee basis, okay? All right, so can that be done, or if so, how could it be done? And I have a phrase up here that I've listed as similarly situated employees. Now, with the IRS, they talk about discrimination, what causes red flags. As soon as you start discriminating in favor of age, wage, or years of service, red flags are going to be alerted, okay, generally speaking. And so what they often come back to is similarly situated employees. So as we look at the question, an employer, do you have an opportunity to be able to classify similarly situated employees that would better fit maybe a couple of the discrepancies or several of the discrepancies that you find? And so these are different classes of employees, right? It could be hourly versus salary. It could be based off of a union versus non-union. It could be different locations. You have an operation in Pennsylvania, but you have a location in California as well. And basing those employees and listing them as similarly situated employees and crafting affordability based on those locations, okay, or that class. So just giving an example here, because I want to go through this relatively quickly here based on the content that we have today. But, let's just use an example here. We've got a warehouse, right? So this is a group of warehouse employees. They're basically all full-time employees here, and the employer pays 50% to all but 3 full-time warehouse employees. So what does that look like? The result is, if you just look at that on its pure face, it's discriminatory. And generally speaking, you have a Section 125 plan that is in place, and you're going to easily fail the Section 125 plan testing, okay, that you would have. So what is the answer to this? What are we looking at as far as assisting this employer with these discrepancies? So the answer is providing all employees or similarly situated employees, regardless of age, very important point, with a specific percentage of premium. That method would be permitted. So in one respect, if an employer has the ability to class out a certain segment of employees, they need to treat each employee that fits in or within that class or that similarly situated employee class, they need to treat them the same. Okay, and so it's regardless of age. Now, in every scenario, is it perfect? Does this, Steve, this perfectly? They can do a similarly situated employee class for this grouping. Maybe it can work, maybe not. But they are going to need to provide consistency to all employees that would fit that specific category. Okay, so very important. Okay, to do that. One question here that has come up here in regard to just affordability is groups under 50. Do they need to meet the affordability rule? If they are not considered an applicable large employer, right, then they do not have that employer mandate aspect of that offer of coverage or affordability. So they would be certainly removed, certainly from that consideration. But I thought that was a very good question because employers are trying to be creative today to try to get out of a lot of things or to make changes to help not only the employer but the employee. And so this is, so the answer, provide all employees or similarly situated employees, regardless of age, with a specific percentage of premium. All right, let's dive in here to the first topic of consideration here today. So I'm going to try throughout the presentation today provide at least some metrics as to what PrimePay has seen. PrimePay was able certainly to provide a solution for our payroll and even non-payroll type of clients, standalone clients, and helping to facilitate their ACA reporting obligation needs. And, when we first started to look at this, this question of controlled groups came up. And be honest, I felt, how many is this going to affect really? I mean, are we talking about a minority, a 10%, 15%? What does this actually look like? When we actually went through this process and we saw the employers who were considered applicable large employers, I mean, the number of employers that were affected by a controlled group scenario came upwards of close to 50% of employers who needed to report. Almost up to 50%. And so as we were dealing with it, I know that you were dealing with it certainly as well. And so what it is all about is asking the right questions, because it's the only way that you're going to drive the best results, okay? And so as I go through these things today, I really want you to think about how you as a benefits broker can best drive value add to your clients to ensure that these kinds of things, these like controlled group and data management, these things are not as big of a frustration as what they were here over the last few months. So think about this, questions to ask. So the first question here that I'm showing here is, how many active employees do you currently have? Now, that sounds kind of, you say, Steve, what does that have to do with a control group here? So follow me with this. I'm kind of leading you through how I would lead a client through these questions. I think a lot of times benefit brokers, you and I, often think about benefit eligible or benefit enrolled employees. That's the number that we're working on with an HRA or a COBRA compliance services. But with that number, we're not getting the full scope, right? We're clearly only getting the number of eligible. We're not counting those who are not eligible for insurance and maybe part-time variable hour employees. And we need to know the number of active employees. So think of this. You might have an employer group that has 38 benefit eligible employees, and that's what you are driving. That's what you have in your mind. But you failed to ask the question, how many active employees do you have? And you come to find out with the answer that there's actually an additional 15 variable or part-time employees, which would put them over the 50 mark. So this simple question doesn't necessarily tie in immediately to a controlled group scenario, but it certainly it needs to be a habit that you are asking on a consistent basis. The next question, just again, leading and kind of drives the next series of questions. What is your tax filing status? Are you a sole proprietor, LLC, C corporation? What kind of establishment? And generally speaking, the next kind of maybe follow-up question to this would just be, if they're not a sole proprietor, would be, a partner. Who are your partners? Who are the primary stakeholders? Because a tax filing status tells us a lot of information about the ownership rules, certainly in benefits. So it's a very good question to ask anyway, but it also can point to the next question, which is, could you be considered as affiliated with another business entity or entities? So if they're telling us there's additional partner opportunities, whether they're a sole proprietor or not, we want to ask the question, can your ownership group be considered as affiliated with another business entity or entities? Now, if they say yes to that question, clearly we get into the realm of well, do you know if you're a commonly controlled group? Has that been determined through your tax advisor, so on and so forth, right? I don't think that you or us here at PrimePay, we have to actually determine that. We don't want to be in that position. So certainly we need to they need to get clarification from their advisor, their tax advisor. But if yes, is it a parent subsidiary, kind of a brother-sister relationship? Again, we don't have time to necessarily go into the full definitions of the ramifications of what those mean. But, generally, as a parent company, do you own 80% stock, in another corporation or each corporation that might be affiliated with you, or in a brother-sister environment, who has effective control of those additional business entities, okay, that they may have? And so immediately, right, if they have other entities, you might just be the broker of record on this particular, item, or entity. And so this can provide additional opportunities for you where you could get introduced to other firms. So again, lastly here, if yes to that question, who would be considered the primary employer for reporting purposes? Under the ACA reporting requirements and obligations under 1094C, it's required to be listed, or someone to be listed, as the authoritative transmittal for the commonly controlled group, for that aggregated group, okay? So these are questions here that if you can set appropriate expectations early on, that whole authoritative transmittal, who's supposed to be primary, who's not primary, that is, all those questions are resolved. So this is really truly just to give you an example of a current client here, just over the last week, we were getting notified that this client just kind of, light bulb went off in their head saying, actually, I need to add these other companies for my reporting. I forgot to add these. So we've had clients up to the 11th and almost 12th hour that just realized that, oh, I need to get this other affiliated entity as part of my reporting obligation. So you can do an extreme part, and I'm sure that you are dealing a lot with clients that were in this commonly controlled group area, but I will say this, that many of these employers, they truly had not considered themselves to be a commonly controlled group. And so by asking these series of questions, it should begin to open up their eyes as to what their obligation would ultimately be. So I want to provide an example here, if I may, for you. And let's just say you're the broker, you're the benefits broker here on a company here called Coffee for Us Cafe, and they've got 15 employees. And as you look at the surface of this little cafe, this little company, clearly from this we would state this is not an applicable large employer, right? But then we start asking some questions, so how many employees do you have? Well, we got about 15 employees, right? Well, what's your tax filing status? Well, we've got a partnership. It's an LLC, partnership. There's, 2 other partners that are involved here with this. Oh, okay. Well, could you be considered as affiliated with another business or entity? Oh, well, yeah, no, actually, we've got, we actually have 6 different entities. We've got, manufacturing plants, a distribution center. All of these carry a different EIN. They're their own company, but we actually have common ownership, partner ownership amongst all of these. Oh, wow, okay. So in immediate calculation, once we've got some numbers for employees, we determine here that Coffee for Us Cafe actually has 65 full-time equivalents. Now, that conversation that you're having specifically with Coffee for Us Cafe has drastically changed, right? You might only be the broker of record, again, for that specific entity, but this could open up the door for you to be able to now have connections with those other partners, the other entities, and who knows where other benefit-related opportunities could even go. But what that does is it gets the other partners talking and then collaborating and coordinating what is needed ultimately in determining, okay, who's the authoritative transmittal, for Coffee for Us Cafe? Who is that? I mean, it may not necessarily be that corporate office. It might be something else, okay? So they have 65 full-time equivalents, which means that each separate company is now subject to that employer mandate, okay? Which also means that penalties are derived separately for each and every employer. So again, this drastically changes the ACA landscape from a corporate 15-employee company thinking I'm a small employer, I don't even have to offer insurance if I didn't want to, but I'm utilizing you as a benefits broker, to offer that, but I don't necessarily have to worry about the employer mandate. Now, all of a sudden, I now have the full ability where I've got to act in every way as an applicable large employer. So as we look at the commonly controlled group, kind of the action items, it's really this. One, you need to, in effect, ensure that all of those 6 entities in our Coffee for Us Cafe example, they need to determine their ALE status in the previous year. So for the 2015 return year, they're going to need to look at their employee count base in 2014 to determine that, okay? So there's going to need to be coordination amongst those other commonly controlled groups to make that happen. That doesn't happen very easily. We have found at PrimePay, it takes time to get communication, to get help in determining, making those full-time equivalent counts to first determine that status. But now that it has been determined that Coffee for Us Cafe is an ALE, well, now the determination is individually, are you going to pay or play? Are you going to be, take part of that employer mandate? So if you say yes, then, you need to offer qualifying coverage. But now what needs to happen is that now we need to monitor the VHE workforce through its various measurement periods. It's quite possible that maybe not the corporate office, but maybe the manufacturing plant that I showed, or the distribution center, or some sales office, whatever, that they might have VHEs. Maybe not all of them, but now each entity is going to have to measure those variable hour employees. And then, of course, if you are an ALE, you then are going to file the 1094-C and then actually distribute the 1095-Cs. So what ultimately needs to happen is that one employer will become the authoritative transmittal. Again, that's not necessarily up for we or you to decide per se, but certainly we can provide some guidance there. But one employer will become the authoritative transmittal and then will list all the other ALE members on 1094-C. So there were several situations that we faced with in trying to get the information. Once we determined that they are a commonly controlled group, trying to get the FTE counts, to just the other various items, data coverage to data management type items that we needed to ultimately achieve here. So the commonly controlled groups, a really important piece. I will trust, based on what we have seen, that you all have dealt with that in a tremendous basis over the last several months. And what I would do is get ahead of the curve, start asking the right questions, because those will ultimately lead to a more fruitful opportunity, and at least a client that will get through that reporting obligation in a more easily fashion. All right, my next question that I want to throw in, and I really do want to tie this in a little bit with controlled groups. We ran into many situations with commonly controlled groups. There's franchise opportunities, there's farm types of industries, restaurant groups. There are a lot of entities that fit into a commonly controlled group area where a seasonal employee or a seasonal worker definition exists. And so I wanted to tie in this specific question because I think just for further clarification about these two definitions. And so we had received several questions related to this. What is the difference between seasonal employees and seasonal workers? So as we look at just a basic definition of seasonal employees, it's an employee who is, and this is just straight out of the definition here, okay, but employee who is hired into a position for which the customary annual employment is 6 months or less. So many of you are aware of that, know that, but it's the next piece that I want to touch on how the seasonal employees factors into that determination of an ALE status. So the counting of those employees to determine whether you are an applicable large employer or not, but also whether you need to measure these employees once they are a seasonal employee or seasonal worker. So look at the next two bullets here, very important. So a seasonal employee, in the second bullet, will be treated the same as a new variable hour employee under the measurement periods, okay? So meaning that you're going to track them through the measurement periods, okay, even as a seasonal employee. But seasonal employees are not relevant to counting the number of employees to determine their ALE status. So it's an opportunity for these entities, if they do indeed have seasonal employees, to be able to actually remove them from the calculation, which may actually reduce the opportunity for them to be considered an applicable large employer in the first place, okay? So there's an opportunity there. Then we get here into seasonal workers, okay? So believe it or not, it's a separate definition, okay? Separate classification, if you will. So under the definition of a seasonal worker, it's a worker who performs labor or services on a seasonal basis, and it's labeled, I've just taken out a few words just for the webinar, but exclusively during holiday seasons. Now, the IRS has applied a broader type of definition to holiday seasons. It doesn't necessarily mean between the Christmas, holiday type of a season. It literally could be a standard, more cyclical, short-term cycle that an employer has that would, kind of mimic a holiday season for that employer, okay? But it's generally, or it is, 120 days or fewer, okay, when you're hiring that individual. Now, as we take that a step further, a seasonal worker now is relevant when counting employees to determine ALE status. So we are throwing them into the mix when we're actually determining their status, if a particular employer is an applicable large employer or not. But there is no application then to where they would be measured just like a variable hour employee through a look-back measurement period. So there's been a lot of confusion around these definitions. I know you all run across it quite often. I hope that kind of breaks it down a little bit as far as what options they would have. So seasonal employees, you'll measure them as a variable hour employee, but you're not going to count them in regard to determining their ALE status. But a worker, seasonal worker, you will not measure them, but you will count them in determining their ALE status. So great question that we've received from many of you that I wanted to share. Measurement periods. I have, just shortly before the deadline approached here, just recently, I spoke with an employer that had over 200 employees within the company, and this just happened. I mean, just a couple weeks ago, a few weeks ago, actually, and we were kind of hitting deadlines, and this employer, for the very first time, heard the words variable hour employee. And I started literally from the ground floor as far as what the definitions are, what they're going to need to do, what the reporting obligation, the data. I mean, just it's amazing. And so many employers have not officially adopted some type of a framework to measure their variable hour employees. And so I write there below on this slide that surprises lurk. Beware. We've had many employers who once, just over the last couple months, they're finalizing their forms, getting everything prepared. They've now created their measurement periods, and they have now looked back into 2015, and they see a couple variable hour employees that did indeed work more than 30 hours on average each week, and they should have offered them coverage last year. So there are several surprises that are lurking for employers. Sometimes some employers don't wish to even do a look back because they don't want to uncover anything. But we will say it is very important that when the IRS comes back to an employer and says, prove to me that this employee received an offer of qualifying coverage, so that you as an employer aren't penalized or the individual isn't penalized, whatever the case may be, how will an employer prove it without having measurement periods reflecting it? So let's just take a groundswell here of kind of a foundation. I don't want to dive into this too much and just labor the point, but I do want to focus on a couple things here just to make sure that we're all on the same page, and then I'm going to show you an example. So this first piece is we're just going to cover the analytics, kind of what makes up these periods, and then we're going to get into the practical application side as an example. But the main number that you want to look at is the upper left-hand corner in that text box, 130 hours or more each month. That is what the IRS is looking at. If a variable hour employee is indeed exceeding 130 hours or more on average throughout that or by the end of their measurement period, we have an individual as an employee that is an eligible individual for qualifying coverage, and that employer needs to do that and provide coverage or face some penalties. So let's just touch on the brief definitions here. The initial measurement period, clearly that's new hires, right? So there are new hires that are going to be hired all throughout the year, any time throughout the year. And so the initial measurement period begins, generally speaking, on the date of hire for each new variable hour employee. It is 3 to 12 months, but is ultimately going to be the same length as the standard measurement period. So you want to be consistent with how you structure the length of your measurement period for new hires as you would for the standard measurement period. Under the standard measurement period, this is for the ongoing or current variable hour employees. And again, it would be between 3 to 12 months. This date is nice because it's going to be consistent year after year after year. It's going to start and stop on the same date each and every year. So if your standard measurement period was October 1st, you know what? When it's going to start again is October 1st of the next year, if you have a 12-month period. So that starts and stops just on the same dates every year. The administrative period, it was the time period that the IRS provided for employers to be able to take the results of those analysis of the variable hour employees' hours, be able to review them, and then be able to offer those individuals coverage as needed, right? So what we see generally is administrative periods that go from 30 days to 60 days. I'd say it's pretty rare to see 90, but we'll have some of those, but 30 to 60 days is pretty much the typical. On the standard measurement period, I did want to say our typical length is at 12 months. So that seems to be the general consensus of what the length of period that employers are choosing. Also, too, in that administrative period, you cannot create an administrative period to prevent gaps in coverage, okay? So that period isn't there to effectively get somebody removed from coverage or anything like that. It's simply a period of time for the HR department to be able to facilitate a new enrollment, as needed, okay? Stability period is then, again, just that period of time to maintain coverage, maintain their eligibility status. So regardless of whether, they had a reduction in hours that listen, they're not even getting close to 30 hours. It doesn't matter. In the stability period, if they elected coverage and become eligible for that, then they need to continue that throughout the stability period. So that also will be 6 to 12 months. And that generally begins on the health plan year. Okay, so health plan year is when the start of the stability period would begin. So let's just go into a practical application, and I'm going to go back to my wonderful example here of Coffee for Us Cafe, and let's just assume here that they have the health plan that starts on a calendar year, so January 1 here through the end of the year. They have 6 locations. Now, in theory, these 6 locations, okay, so they are considered an applicable large employer, every single one of them, okay? So each could have their own separate stop dates of measurement periods. They could determine the lengths separately, as needed for each EIN, or they could do it all together, or have a similar type of a length and process, stop date, and so forth. Let's just assume it's all similar, okay, here for the example. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to back into the dates here for the standard measurement period. So let's do this. So if they had a health plan that started January 1, so that tells me that I've got to begin my stability period on the health plan renewal date, so January 1, and I'm going to choose a 12-month period. So that means I start that January 1st through 12/31/2016. The stability period for the initial measurement period, that's going to vary, right? Because based on the hire date of the new hire, the stability period will be different and start and stop at different times all throughout the year for each individual new hire, okay? So that'll be different. So now we back into the administrative period, okay? We have the stability period in place. The employer says I want a 60-day administrative period. So we have 60 days, so that means we start it November 1st through 12/31. The initial measurement period would be at 30 days, generally is what is used here as far as an administrative period. So we have our standard measurement period, administrative period. And so we now need to back into the standard measurement period. And if we selected 12 months on the stability, then we got to select 12 months on the standard measurement period. So that means if we go back 12 months from the administrative start point, we now are at November 1st, 2014 through 10/31/2015, which means that the employer will have needed to have been measuring their variable hour employees. If they had a January 1st, 2016 start date, that they should have been measuring their variable hours going back to November 1st, 2014, okay? And then the initial measurement period, just lastly here, is the, select 12 months because that's the 12 months that we selected for the standard measurement period. And again, the start and end date will vary just based on when that new hire, ultimately, based on the date of hire of that individual. So as you see here, so this is a great opportunity for you as a benefits broker to really shed some light. There was a general nationwide confusion around how do I establish, how do we actually use this framework? How is it even done? What data am I using to kind of calculate all this? All of those kind of questions. And so you can really play an important part in kind of laying the seed, kind of laying the foundation as to, the start, stop times of these, maybe there's a specific type of industry that they're in. So you can really remove or reduce a lot of these surprises. And so a couple ways that you can actually do that to assist them through this, through these measurement period process is that first, this is one of the great early questions or discussions that you can have with your client, and it's this: how are you classifying your employees? Now, the IRS has provided some extreme checklists, and they're all over employers for how to classify an employee versus a 1099. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about that with this. What I'm really talking about is the next bullet point, that once you are an employee, that the employer truly classifies these employees correctly. That a full-time employee is someone who is hired at the date of hire, they will work 30 hours or more automatically. Okay, you're a full-time employee, we need to offer you coverage. Part-time employee is that fixed. You have just a fixed amount of hours that you're going to work every week. You won't get even remotely close to 30 hours or more. You're going to work 15 hours a week, period. So it's a fixed amount every week. That's part-time. Variable hour employee is that, based upon the facts and circumstances of, hiring this individual, I don't know, they could work more than 30 hours sometime. They could work less than 30 hours. I don't know. So those employees, those seasonal employees, what have you, those are considered variable hour employees. You track them, in other words, like a variable hour employee. So this is very important because as the employee information, if the classification is correct early on, then that data will then fit into the, the reporting obligation that they're using, or help facilitate a quicker method of knowing who should I be tracking and measuring versus those that I don't need to necessarily worry about measuring. I may need to worry if you're a full-time employee that I've offered coverage and it's affordable and such, but I don't have to necessarily measure. So very good questions. Classification of employees, really, really important. You might want to talk about, we talked earlier about similarly situated employees, maybe designing measurement periods with different lengths based on that particular class of employees, maybe based on location, maybe based on union versus non-union. So, based on whether a particular entity has high turnover, low turnover, there's seasonal cycles that may come into play. So you have an opportunity to talk to them about maybe segmenting to determine really the best lengths of periods, on how they want to evaluate those employees. You can really reduce a lot of surprises, I think, with that. And then lastly here, is really attaching the variable hour employee to the correct measurement period. And what I mean by that, here at PrimePay, we actually have it's automated. If you tell us when they were hired and when the measurement periods start and stop, we can determine when and where that variable hour employee needs to be measured. But there's other solutions that an employer may use that, and there's been a lot of confusion in, okay, so once that new hire gets through their initial measurement period and they're in their stability period, when am I supposed to start sticking them into the standard measurement period for evaluation? There's a lot of confusion in regard to a lot of the new hires and how they need to be measured, whether it's in that initial standard measurement period and so forth. So very important there in regard to that. All right, so those are very good questions. I see, actually, somebody must have got my slide deck earlier, but there was a question that I saw here in regard to this very question. So, can I change the length of my measurement period this year? Do I have an opportunity to be able to, I made a mistake, or, I chose 6 months, I shouldn't have, I should have gone with a 12-month, length, and I need to change it. So can I? Well, the answer is, yeah, absolutely, you can. So what the IRS and a lot of other attorneys in this area have said, you can go back to the IRS notice 2014-49. This is the current guidance that provides information here in this area, and it basically states this: sure, absolutely, it is permitted, but please try to follow some existing guidance, okay? And so there's some basic guidelines here that they list, and I show here, there's a couple different scenarios, okay? The first scenario might be, or the easiest or the cleanest way would be to change your length only until you have completed that standard measurement period. So for instance, here you have a standard measurement period, if I gave an example, that ended here April 30th, okay? And the previous length was 6 months. You measured your employees during that period. You can change, okay? Say you want to add now 12 months. Well, starting May 1st, start your 12-month period, okay? So start and stop, actually on kind of a firm end date, okay, when a standard measurement period ends. That would probably provide the cleanest method to the issue. Where it gets sticky, and we might have some employers that say, I have to do it, but that would be a mid-period change, meaning that we're kind of in the middle of our standard measurement period, but we are now wanting to make a change. And so it does get a little more complicated. We can't get into all of the calculation items here today, but what that employer will need to do is to count the hours of service applied to the employee in the original period or the first period, all right? And then they're going to have to do a recalculation of the hours of service earned in the first period using the hours of service applied to the employee in the new period that they're using. And so the main point that I want to stress, and it's part of this guidance, is it basically states, the IRS says you cannot disadvantage an employee. You can't, an employer just can't change their length of the period. It's kind of like, okay, do over. And here you had an employee that was clearly averaging over 30 hours, but based on this new measurement period and changing the lengths, you've now maybe reduced those hours for that employee, and now this employee is not now eligible for coverage. And what the IRS has said is, no. You cannot disadvantage employees. So if your employer is considering a mid-period change, I would ask that you go into that 2014-49. They provide some good examples in there, and I would suggest you look at that before the employer ultimately determines that that's the best scenario for them. It might very well be, but be considerate at least of that. Data management. The third item here that we have today is data management, this has clearly, I think, from hearing from you all as benefits brokers, working with so many of you during the last 3 to 4 months, just specifically on this, the data management aspect was a lot, right? Not only was controlled groups a big deal, measurement periods a very big deal, but data management, the collaboration, the integration, the coordination of the data that's needed. It's not rocket science, but it's that coordination of where to get all of that data and getting it where it needs to. So it's really knowing, or an employer knowing, the how, the where, and the why. So we have to explain to employers, you will need to explain to employers just why some of this specific data is needed. What's it used for? You know, maybe part of the hours worked each and every pay period is what's used for the, you know, for the measurement periods and determining the number of hours, so on and so forth. The rate of pay, we need to determine affordability and so forth. So the how, the where, the why of this data management is really, really critical. So what I've tried to do here is break this down into little snippets here. I've got kind of 4 different snippets that I hope that you will find is helpful. Because ultimately where you can truly come in is really assisting the clients with that specific data, because you may not know where they are getting all of this data, where they have accumulated it, where they're pushing it, where they're receiving it. And so it's important for you to start digging into some of these details. So in the first item here that I show, payroll is going to provide the lion's share of this data, okay? Now, think payroll a second. Payroll is specific to the employee generally, but it's going to house a lot of that vast demographic type of static information that's needed on these reports. And those are things like name of employee, social address, date of birth, the hire date, the term date. I mean, those things are huge because they're put into payroll, on a very religious basis, because you only want to pay people when you need to pay them. But another big area, and I think something that gets kind of overlooked sometimes, is this full-time employee count and total employee count. When you think about where employers house this data, they may have it in a benefit admin system, right? Now, some Ben admin systems are more full HRIS systems that encompass all employees, all information, but most do not. They're simply a benefit enrollment engine of some sort, which is all good, but it's really housing the information needed for the benefit eligible employees and not necessarily their total active base. And so payroll really is an excellent way to get their full-time employee count and total employee count, which is needed on the 1094-C. And then lastly, as we round out this from a total hour, from an affordability aspect, we have the total hours worked, rate of pay frequency, which again is not always just listed in a benefit admin, type of a platform, okay, or system that they would have. And so payroll sits with about 75% of that data. Now, PrimePay, if we have a payroll client of PrimePay's, we are like that computer and cloud there, where we're actually pushing that data directly into the system and pushing all of this required data automatically. But this is a portion of the data, maybe a good majority of the data, but there's more, right? So then we need to think about coverage information. Where does the employer sit with this? Where do they have it? You have it. You do have some of it. You may have all of it. Carriers are certainly going to have this information. The employer is going to have it, but you may not, again, know where they're keeping it, in a filing cabinet. What accessibility do they have of this information? So what's needed here as well is the coverage offered. We need to know those who are eligible and not eligible, who waived, who enrolled. If there was a status event change, that information is needed, okay, within the plan. Something more that's more simple, easy, but employee share of the lowest cost monthly premium. Fairly easy, but again, a data component. And then the names of the covered individuals, so spouse, dependents, so their socials or date of birth, are certainly going to be needed. So this is, this is at least one slide that really provides a tremendous amount of just, hey, this is what you need to be able to fulfill this obligation. And, it's, again, you thinking as a benefits broker, how can I drive value add to greater assist my clients or prospects in getting or achieving this information? Now, as we look at this just a little more closely, just to break it down one step further, would be on the actual forms themselves. And so, I left out the 1094 forms. There's a lot of employer-specific information on them, but I wanted to specifically focus on the 1095 forms because that has really created most of the agita, okay, with employers. and the data. So as you look at B forms, again, this would be furnished by fully insured carriers showing coverage provided. There, so 1095B, that's for the small employer. Okay, if you're a self-funded employer, you're going to provide this. So, or it would be by the carrier automatically. But the covered individual information, if the employer needs to provide it, is going to be, it's real simple, really. Name, SOCH, the date of birth, and then months of coverage, okay? But think about the months of coverage. It's not as if it's just on some simple spreadsheet as to when an employee got enrolled or whether there was a life event that changed or added a new dependent that's now enrolled. I mean, there's a lot of timing issues with this. And so accumulating not only just this data, but also on an ongoing basis throughout the year, those specific changes are very important. Now, on the C forms, we get a little more extensive. Clearly this is furnished by your applicable large employers, whether they are showing that they're providing coverage or no coverage whatsoever, right? So they're obligated to provide these C forms. If you're self-funded, you're now going to get a little deeper and get into the Part 3, which is more extensive. Fully insured carriers will provide that coverage on 1095B. All right. But for coverage information, there's just really 3 additional items that are included as part of the codes, the 1 codes and 2 codes that are required. But line 14 is the offer of coverage code. Line 15, the lowest cost premium contribution, and line 16, the 4980H safe harbor code would need to be added. Okay. As to when they made affordable coverage or not affordable coverage, were they an employee for the first 3 months of the year? Were they not? And then the final items, which are the same as the 1095B. So it's this is an opportunity for you to get ahead of this. It's to really get ahead and get in front of your clients and say, listen, this is what you're going to need. You need to be thinking about this right now. I mean, as far as how you're accumulating it, or think about what you did to get through this year's, or 2015's returns. What can we do to make it better? Okay. But also in a prospective way, there's a real opportunity here to showcase your knowledge, your value add, and how you can help these clients. So an important question that we've attached to this specific content item is, I'm an ALE, I'm an applicable large employer, and we'll be changing from a fully insured to a self-funded plan in June. So how do I do? How do I do this change? How do I show it? How do I reflect it here on the forms? And so this question comes up a lot. Many of your employers have fiscal plan years, so there are changes that absolutely occur kind of mid-calendar year. And so let's kind of cover quickly, and it's not too difficult, but there's certainly some changes that need to be made. So as we look at 1094C, the first bullet point, no change. The same information that's required from before, they need to do it again. So regardless of fully insured or self-funded, the 1094C is basically the same, or it is the same. Form 1095C, though, you begin to see some changes. So there is a possible change on line 15. As you look at the specific picture that I have there, you look at line 15, that's the employee share of the lowest cost monthly premium for self-only coverage. So I show there $150, okay? That's what the monthly amount is. Now, but that could vary. So if we had an employer here in June that changed to a self-funded plan, they now change the employee contribution. Now in come June, they're going to need to show, we raised that to $155 or, whatever other amount. They're going to have to make that change then on line 15. So line 15 could change based on the change made when they adopted the self-funded plan. Then change will be reflected in Part 3, okay? And what is needed there is that you add the self-funded coverage for the months that they were enrolled in that coverage. And so as you see below, Jane and baby Smith, as of June, we need to mark now, okay, as an employer, I am showing that coverage. But on a corresponding way, the employee will receive a corresponding Form 1095B from the carrier, and their form is going to reflect coverage between January and May. Okay, so therefore now the individual has a 1095B, 1095C, reflecting that they were made an offer of coverage, were enrolled in coverage that entire year. So I know many of you look at these last several months, and I've talked to several of you. You guys have you have taken the lion's share of so much of this responsibility, whether you had wanted to or not. But I really wanted to provide an analysis here for you to think differently about this opportunity. And I wanted to do a SWOT analysis, so that's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So again, bringing this down to your agency, down to you. What does this thing really look like for you? Is this a boon to my agency? Is it just a detriment to my activity and to new business? What does this thing look like? And so I just wanted to provide just a little bit of perspective. As I see the strength for you as an agency, I cannot tell you how many times that I've heard from employers or in the conversations that the benefits broker is absolutely 100% the most trusted ACA advisor to the client. You sit at and I've said this before to you all, but you sit in such a wonderful spot to be able to drive actually the best compliance, to set the stage most appropriately. Can an accountant necessarily do that? They could, but they are not in that position. It's not their tax advisor. It's you as a benefits broker. And I think truly that your strength, if you adopt this, if you take it head on, if you say, hey, as an agency, we are absolutely all in assisting our clients, then I'm going to tell you that second bullet point, client dependency on you, will absolutely be huge within this data requirement. I mean, just with this ACA compliance requirement. So I think there is absolute real strength for you to take full advantage of this compliance or this obligation, certainly with your clients. Weakness, right? So the greatest amount of confusion is in a lot in the data management, but it's also in the other points that I had made in regard to commonly controlled groups. You're sitting in a position where you're maybe the broker of record on one employer, but you just don't have that insight. You don't have that transparency, maybe that accessibility in the other entities. And I think there is some weakness there, but I think you can play it to your strength. But also, do you personally know where the data resides? I mean, you may not fully understand the payroll vendor that the client is using. How can you best assist them? Do you personally know that they're going to be able to take those data points out of their payroll, somehow get it into a spreadsheet so that they can get it, into their ACA reporting solution or whatever that may be? And so I think that you can turn these weaknesses into strengths, but it is kind of an area where a lot of you out there, you don't have all of the available information, so it might be a little more difficult to certainly assist. Opportunities, I think, abound. Time equals money. And I will say this, that the amount of time that you all have spent with ACA, you thought you could take a vacation in February once you got all done with your January, business and renewals, all of that. But we have spent the last 2 months solid still talking about ACA and assisting our clients. So time is money. That's been valuable, and it is very valuable to you, but it is time well spent, because I believe that the value and the opportunity that you have placed, or the time that you have placed, is only going to increase your retention efforts, right? It's going to create client dependency on you, which is huge, but it's also going to increase other revenue opportunities. Thinking of that controlled group scenario where, I now know of 5 other entities that I might have opportunities to win their business in benefits or otherwise. Or that client is so dependent on you that they're willing to look at other opportunities that you have invested time in to be able to sell, to their employees or whatever it may be. Also, too, from a client acquisition, your ability to prospect and look and get more clients, this provides your practical application or involvement, meaning your ability to work with an employer from the start to the finish of getting them actually, distribution of their forms and e-filing, you being able to live it it's going to enable you so much to be able to bring it to life when you talk to your prospective client saying, hey, we just had a client recently that was a commonly controlled group, and this is what I found, and this is how we tackled it. This is how we actually successfully managed the data component, the measurement periods, and ultimately got them filed, right? So that's a great story certainly to tell. The last item is threats, okay? We all don't want to hear them, but they're there, right? And so if you as an agency have said, ooh, I don't even want to tackle this ACA stuff, I'm going to let them, help where I can on some coverage information, but that's really as far as I want to take it. I'm going to tell you that there are other entities out there that are very willing to work with that client, not only assisting them through the ACA reporting obligation, but it's ultimately, they want the health insurance, and these are going to comprise other national payroll providers, certainly PEOs, maybe third-party vendors that are involved in insurance and on the health insurance, other online brokerage firms that are there. So if you show zero value with the data management aspect with your clients, it can greatly hurt the relationship and really put you in a position where maybe they need help. And if you were unable to provide it in a meaningful way, they might look at additional areas. I don't think you need to, those threats are real, but I think if you look at the strengths that you have, and even turning the weaknesses into opportunities, which I think you can, I think you've got a strong opportunity here with your clients. So as I kind of wrap up here, and thank you for your patience here with this information. I know it was a lot, but I want you to think about a compliance focus. And one of the areas that I want you to think about as you talk with your clients is really ensuring or helping your clients better prepare for an audit. So yeah, that's what I said, like they're going to get an audit. I mean, you're not going to protect them from avoiding an audit. Hey, they're going to get an audit if they're going to get an audit. But how can you better prepare them for it? And there's a lot of key things here with what I just spoke about, the variable hour employee measurement period, really critical to help your employer clients get through an IRS audit just on, hey, is this an employee of yours? Can you prove that they didn't work 30 hours or more? You're going to need to do that. Also, ERISA, think about this, folks. Your ERISA SPD must include language on the measurement periods, explaining the measurement periods to the employees. Let me say it again. Your ERISA health and welfare benefit documents must include language that explains the measurement periods for the variable hour employees. It's got to be there. But COBRA, non-discrimination documents, clearly with the ever-changing legislative environment, there's always this additional just new business, new documents, reviewing, amending, a lot of new language that has certainly been added. So you have a watch list here. And what I would strongly suggest is that you start reviewing now, not only reviewing procedures with the existing clients that you've been able to work with, through all of this ACA reporting piece, but you also, need to take the opportunity of them like, okay, don't just give a sigh of relief now that the 2015 forms are done and the filing may be done. What are we doing for 2016? Let's better prepare. What can we do now to ensure that come January of next year, we're not scrambling, that we've got everything in place. And you sit in that most wonderful position to be able to do that. So think about where you can help your key clients really to increase knowledge and support the process. Checklists are really, really good, like some of the slides that I just showed you with just showing the data requirements. I mean, just giving them some visuals on how things work. I think checklists are a very good way to get you and certainly your clients on track. Think about webinars. I mean, certainly PrimePay, we do a lot of webinars. We are very open to helping and assisting you with client-focused webinars. Maybe there's opportunities for you to reach more of your clients and or prospects by, holding client-focused compliance, ACA-related webinars to ensure that they are indeed on track. So think about that watch list, you know, and prepare. Do things now. Don't wait further. Don't just relax here now that that's done. Really get them focused on the 2016 return as we really ultimately want to make that experience much better than it was. I do want to mention just two things, if I may. We have, for our broker concierge partners, we had launched this here a few months ago, but we now have an exclusive access for our broker concierge partners as part of our broker community portal. This portal is tremendous. It has, not only can you find kind of the presentation slide decks that we have on these webinars, you can submit leads and track those accounts through the process so you can view all of your accounts. Certainly you could see some commission reports that would be posted. You have access to the full library content, which is just tremendous. Since you're on the go, like we all are, there is a mobile app access to this. So when you're out on the go, you have the ability to interact with your PrimePay team, but also view your accounts, get information. If you're in a situation where you need some specific technical guidance on commonly controlled groups, why don't you head into your mobile app and pull that specific item? We will have that. So there's things like that that can be really garnered. I strongly encourage you to go and check out our broker portal, as it has a tremendous amount of information to truly engage you with what we're doing here at PrimePay. Another broker concierge exclusive that is still going on as a promotion to our clients is our +1 referral program. And it's as easy as this. If you submit a referral through the broker community portal, as I had just mentioned, and that referral becomes a client with PrimePay, we will give your client a $50 Visa gift card, and you also earn a $100 Visa gift card. Pretty cool, right? So over $150, it's a nice way for you to showcase to your client, say, hey, based on our relationship with PrimePay, we're able to secure, you know, just a little gift here for you for coming on board to PrimePay. So with that, as we think about spring cleaning, I hope that, well, actually, we don't really like the idea of spring cleaning. That might be a little negative, I suppose, but I tell you what, when we're done with spring cleaning, you get pretty satisfied, right? I mean, you're very satisfied with, you know, just the newness, you know, just, I don't know, feel really good, you know, once it's done. And I think if you take that opportunity today to really access, discuss, have these connections with your employers about these at least 3 specific items, I think they will carry a tremendous amount of weight in your relationship, but also in opportunities. So I want to thank you for attending today. I know I went a little longer than I normally do, but I appreciate your patience with that and trust that you were able to receive some great practical application that you can go out right away and communicate with your clients. Our broker concierge contact information is above. Look for the webinar follow-up materials. So you guys will receive, everyone will receive a link to our recording of the webinar today, so you will have that. But we also do have some exclusive broker concierge content, specifically on the commonly controlled groups, that I think you will find very helpful. And let's not forget, the real reason why you attended is the free CE voucher. So for all of you that attended here today, you will receive a free CE voucher. So look for that in the follow-up emails. And the next webinar, please join us Wednesday, May 4th, where we are going to talk on the slide that I had shown about better preparing your clients for an audit, and what you can do, what steps can you take or make to ensure that they'll be better prepared, okay, in an audit situation. So with that, that will conclude our webinar. I can't thank you enough for the partnership, the trust and support that you've given PrimePay here over the last several weeks, months, and even years for some of you. Thank you. Have a great day. Enjoy the early spring activities. So that will conclude our webinar. Have a great day.